We've talked a lot about strategies for being more persuasive, but we should also talk about ways that audiences can try to avoid being influenced by your brilliant persuasive abilities. So let's go over a few of those issues now. The first way audiences resist persuasion is through selective listening. We all do this in our daily lives. You might listen to your parents lecture you after doing something wrong, paying scant attention to the lecture, and then beginning to pay actual attention to the punishment part of the lecture. In this case, you're selectively listening, as others do, because you disagree with or don't want to hear what your parents are saying. So when we disagree with speakers or we don't want to be presented with information that might ask us to challenge our beliefs, we selectively listen. The way to help avoid this as a speaker is to begin with something agreeable. So for instance, let's say you're doing a persuasive speech about the Affordable Health Care Act. Regardless of the way that people feel we should deal with health care issues in our country, there are surely some things that most people agree on. So for example, you could start with a discussion of the incredibly high cost of health care in the United States. Very few people would disagree with that contention. So by starting with something that most people agree with, you give yourself a better chance of not having the audience member shut you down completely when they learn you're about to argue in favor of a policy they don't like, because they have more of an incentive to listen to you because you started off talking about solving a problem they also feel we have as a country. The second reason that people tend to selectively listen is because the speech you're giving isn't clear. Without a clear organizational structure that makes sense and is bolstered with good transitions, it's difficult for people to listen to you, and chances are good that they'll choose not to. So solving this problem is easy. Just make sure you give a clearly organized speech, and you will avoid having this problem with audience members. When people's beliefs are so strong that they don't want to consider other alternatives, or when they have an incentive to deny a message relates to them, an audience member will dispose of your message. In the case of someone who just doesn't want to hear an alternative point of view, it may be tough to get that person on board, but you have a much better chance of doing so if you do two things. Know your topic and cite your sources. If you really know your topic so that you're not constantly looking down at your notes, you'll seem much more credible as a speaker who knows what he or she is talking about, making it much harder to ignore you. If you are doing a speech and are clearly unprepared, it makes it seem like you really don't know what you're talking about, and that makes it very easy for someone to dispose of your messages. In addition, if you've done really good research and have the strongest possible sources, it is harder for someone to ignore what you're saying. It's like what I've said the difference is between an A-level research and C-level research speech. If you just use the first stuff you find online, it's easy to think that you don't really know much about your topic because you haven't done much research on it. But if you use very high quality source citations, it becomes much harder to ignore you because you've clearly read the most important and up-to-date material. People can also dispose of the message when they deny that the message relates to them. A good example of this is smokers or people who ride motorcycles without helmets. Anyone paying any attention at all knows that these two activities make it far more likely that someone will be seriously injured or even die. But as humans, we're all easily able to ignore messages that contradict what we want to believe. So smokers may think I'll quit soon enough to save my health, or by the time I'm sick they'll have cured lung cancer. People who drink and drive convince themselves that they're actually really good drivers when they've been drinking because they're so much more careful. When dealing with these folks, the best strategy is to personalize the speech. So tell a young audience what the average age of lung cancer is when someone starts smoking as a teenager. That might just get that person to listen. Tell a group of people how many people didn't survive motorcycle accidents in Berks County or in Pennsylvania simply because they weren't wearing a helmet. The more personal you make the speech, the better the chance you have of getting people who want to dispose of your message to listen to you. A third way that people can resist persuasion is by belittling the source. This means that when people have a hard time denying the information, they'll try to deny it based on who is giving that information to them. There are three things you can do to make it less likely that people can belittle you as a source. The first thing is to maintain strong personal credibility. How likely are people going to be to listen to a politician and believe her if she's accused of cheating on taxes or on a spouse? It really doesn't matter that President Nixon had a lot of great ideas about protecting the environment or foreign relations because Watergate took the vast majority of his credibility away. So live an ethical life and make good choices so that you don't give anyone any ammunition that they could use to belittle you. Using a variety of sources and using unbiased sources will also help with belittling. If the person wants to belittle you because you're too conservative or too liberal, don't play into his hands by using sources that point to your bias. Be smart about what sources you use and use the most unbiased sources you can. Use a variety of sources like I talked about when we discussed statistics, and show your audience that you tried honestly to give them unbiased information. Doing so makes it much harder for someone to challenge you as too biased to be listened to. Finally, be wary of the boomerang effect. This happens when you've done such a good job of pointing out a potential problem that people feel helpless after your speech. In order to make sure this doesn't happen to you, make sure that you balance the seriousness of a problem with a message of hope. Though a controversial film in some circles, An Inconvenient Truth About the Issue of Climate Change does an excellent job of avoiding the boomerang effect. After a good while of devastating and scary arguments and evidence about the decline of our planet, it would be very easy for an audience member to say, well, we're all going to hell in a handbasket anyway, so why should I care, or why should I change what I do? But what the filmmakers did was make very sure that they ended the film with very easy and specific actions people could take in their daily lives that could turn the tide on climate change and save the planet. Had they not made the decision to add those elements to the end of the film, they would have done an excellent job of convincing people we're in trouble as a planet, but a really poor job of persuading anyone that there are things we can all do to reverse the trend they argued is occurring. So that's it for resisting persuasion. After you've worked so hard to create a great persuasive speech, don't let these 4 issues take you down as a speaker. Make sure that you account for them when you need to so that you can be as persuasive as you're capable of being.